My narcissistic mother flirted with every boyfriend I had because she thought I didn't deserve them. After ruining 4 relationships, she tried it again. But this time, my boyfriend exposed her manipulation in front of everyone and walked away with me. I'm Emma. I'm 24 and I've been dealing with this nightmare for the past 6 years. Every single guy I've brought home has gotten the full treatment from my mother. The lingering hugs, the inappropriate comments about how handsome they are, the way she suddenly needs to wear her tightest dresses whenever they come over. But 3 months ago, I finally decided to do something about it. I was tired of watching potential relationships crumble because my mother couldn't handle the fact that someone might actually want to be with me instead of her. So I came up with a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. I was going to introduce her to a fake boyfriend. The whole thing started with my most recent ex, Tyler. He was this sweet, genuine guy who worked as a teacher at the elementary school near my apartment. We'd been dating for about 4 months when I finally worked up the courage to bring him home for Sunday dinner. My mother, Patricia, was 52 and still absolutely stunning. She'd been a model in her 20s and never let anyone forget it. Even now, she spent 3 hours every morning on her hair and makeup routine, worked out with a personal trainer 5 days a week, and had a closet full of clothes that cost more than most people's rent. The moment Tyler walked through the door, I could see the calculation in her eyes. "Oh my goodness, Emma, you didn't tell me how handsome he was," she said, pulling Tyler into a hug that lasted way too long. "I can see why you're so smitten." During dinner, she peppered him with questions about his job, his hobbies, his family, normal getting to know you stuff, except for the way she kept touching his arm and laughing at everything he said like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. "You know, Emma never brings anyone home," she told him while I was in the kitchen getting dessert. I was starting to worry she'd never find someone good enough for her. When I came back with a pie, Tyler looked uncomfortable and my mother was practically glowing. After he left, she cornered me in the hallway. "He seems nice, honey," she said in that tone that meant she was about to say something cutting. "Maybe a little simple for you, though. I mean, elementary school teacher, you could probably do better." This was her pattern. First, she'd flirt with them to test whether they'd respond to her attention. Then she'd plant seeds of doubt in my head about whether they were good enough for me. Meanwhile, she'd start texting them directly, finding excuses to invite them over when I wasn't around. It had worked with my last 3 boyfriends. They'd all ended up confused and overwhelmed by the weird dynamic with my mother, and eventually they'd just fade away rather than deal with it. But Tyler was different. He actually told me what was happening. "Your mom has been texting me," he said 2 weeks after the dinner. We were sitting in his living room and he looked genuinely troubled. "What kind of texts?" He showed me his phone. Messages from my mother asking about his weekend plans, telling him about yoga classes he might enjoy, suggesting they grab coffee sometime to talk about Emma's happiness. "She says she wants to make sure I'm treating you right," Tyler said. "But some of these messages feel weird." I scrolled through them, my stomach sinking. She was being subtle, but I could see exactly what she was doing, creating a private communication channel, positioning herself as the concerned mother who just wanted what was best for me. "I don't want to cause problems between you and your family," Tyler said. "But this feels inappropriate." "It is inappropriate," I said. "And I'm so sorry. This is exactly why I don't usually introduce guys to her. Has this happened before every single time?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "Emma, that's not normal. You know that, right? I did know that. I'd known it for years. But knowing something is wrong and being able to fix it are 2 completely different things." 3 days later, Tyler broke up with me. "I really care about you," he said, "but I can't handle your mother. The constant texts, the way she looks at me, the things she says about us. It's too much." I cried for hours after he left. Not just because I'd lost another good guy, but because I realized I was going to spend my entire life alone unless I figured out how to deal with my mother. That's when I came up with a fake boyfriend plan. I needed someone who could handle my mother's manipulation tactics, someone who wouldn't be flattered or intimidated by her attention, someone who could give her a taste of her own medicine without getting emotionally involved. The problem was I didn't know anyone like that. Then I remembered Alex Russo. Alex and I had been friends in college before we'd lost touch after graduation. He was studying theater, then planning to be an actor, and he was absolutely gorgeous. Tall, dark hair, green eyes, the kind of smile that made professors give him extensions on papers he'd never actually written. Alex was also gay, though he hadn't been open about it in college. We'd stayed in touch on social media, and I'd seen his posts about coming out to his family and moving in with his boyfriend Marcus. More importantly, Alex was the kind of person who loved drama and had 0 patience for manipulative people. I sent him a message explaining my situation, and to my surprise, he was immediately interested. "Oh, honey, this sounds like the most fun I've had in months," he wrote back. "Marcus is going to love hearing about this." When do we start? We met for coffee the next weekend to plan everything out. Alex was even more attractive than he'd been in college, and he had this confident energy that I knew would drive my mother crazy. So what's the goal here, he asked. Are we trying to make her back off, or are we going full revenge mode? I just want her to leave my actual relationships alone, I said. If she's focused on you, maybe she'll stop sabotaging my real dating life. Got it. So I need to be charming enough to get her attention, but unavailable enough to frustrate her. Exactly. We worked out our backstory. We'd been reconnected through mutual friends, had been dating for 2 months, and things were getting serious. Alex would be attentive, but not overly affectionate, successful, but not flashy. Interested in her opinion, but not seeking her approval. The key, Alex said, is to make her feel like she's in competition with you. Like I might choose her if she plays her cards right. That sounds terrible. It is terrible, but it's also exactly how her brain works, right? She can't stand the idea that you have something she can't have. 2 weeks later, I brought Alex home for dinner. My mother answered the door in a dress I'd never seen before. Her hair and makeup absolutely perfect. She took one look at Alex and I could practically see her pupils dilate. "You must be Alex," she said, extending her hand like she expected him to kiss it. "Emma has told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Alex said, giving her that $1,000,000 smile. "And you must be Patricia." Emma definitely didn't mention how beautiful her mother is. I watched my mother practically melt. She giggled like a teenager and ushered us into the living room, immediately launching into hostess mode. Over dinner, Alex was absolutely masterful. He asked my mother about her modeling career, complimented her cooking, and listened intently to her stories about the fascinating people she'd met over the years. But he also kept one hand on my knee under the table and made sure to include me in every conversation. "Emma's so lucky to have such an interesting mother," he said. "I can see where she gets her confidence from." My mother was practically glowing. "Oh, Emma's always been so shy. I keep telling her she needs to put herself out there more." "I think Emma's perfect exactly as she is," Alex said, squeezing my hand. "But I'd love to hear more about your modeling days. That must have been such an adventure." For the next hour, my mother regaled us with stories I'd heard 1,000 times. Alex laughed at all the right moments, asked follow-up questions, and made her feel like the most interesting person in the world. After dinner, while I was loading the dishwasher, I could hear them talking in the living room. Alex was asking about her workout routine and skincare regimen, telling her she looked at least 10 years younger than her age. "Emma is so lucky to have someone who appreciates quality," my mother said. "I definitely appreciate quality," Alex replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. When we left that night, my mother hugged Alex goodbye and told him he was welcome anytime. "She likes you," I said as we drove away. "Oh, she more than likes me. Did you see her face when I complimented her dress? She's already planning our affair. That's disgusting. That's your mother." Over the next few weeks, Alex's plan worked perfectly. My mother started texting him within days of that first dinner. Innocent messages, at first asking how work was going, sharing articles she thought he might find interesting. Alex showed me every message and carefully crafted his responses to keep her interested but not quite satisfied. He was friendly but not flirty, appreciative but not pursuing. Meanwhile, my mother started treating me differently. She was nicer to me when Alex was around, almost like she was trying to prove what a wonderful mother she was. She stopped making little digs about my appearance or my job, and she actually seemed to listen when I talked. She's performing for him. Alex explained she wants him to see her as this amazing, supportive mother, so he'll think she's relationship material. It was working so well that I almost forgot the whole thing was fake. Then my mother escalated. She started finding excuses to drop by my apartment when she knew Alex would be there. She'd bring groceries I hadn't asked for, or claim she was in the neighborhood and wanted to say hi. Always dressed to the nines, always with some small gift or treat for Alex. "Your mother brought me homemade cookies," Alex told me after one of her surprise visits. "She stayed for 2 hours talking about how worried she is that you're not eating enough." "What did you tell her?" I told her I'm making sure you're well taken care of. That seemed to frustrate her. The breaking point came 6 weeks into our fake relationship. My mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon crying. "Emma, I need to tell you something," she sobbed into the phone. "I think I'm falling in love with Alex." My stomach dropped. "Mom, what are you talking about? I know it's wrong. I know he's your boyfriend, but I can't help how I feel. He's just so wonderful, and he really understands me in a way that most men don't." "Mom, you've known him for 6 weeks. Sometimes that's all it takes. Look, I don't want to hurt you, but I think Alex might have feelings for me too. The way he looks at me, the things he says, I think he's just staying with you because he doesn't want to hurt your feelings." I was quiet for so long that she asked if I was still there. I'm here, I said finally. Maybe we should all sit down and talk about this like adults, she continued. I think if we're honest about our feelings, we can figure out what's best for everyone. That night, I called Alex and told him what had happened. She wants to have a conversation about feelings. He said, "Oh, this is perfect. Perfect. Alex, this is nightmare territory. She's completely lost her mind. No, this is exactly what we wanted. She's so obsessed with the idea of stealing your boyfriend that she's willing to blow up your relationship to get him. Now we can show her exactly how it feels." What do you mean? Trust me. Set up that conversation this weekend at your place. Tell her we'll all discuss the situation honestly. I didn't like the look in Alex's eyes, but I was too deep into this mess to back out now. Saturday evening, my mother arrived at my apartment dressed like she was going to a red carpet event. Tight black dress, full makeup hair styled in perfect waves. She brought a bottle of expensive wine and a nervous energy that filled the entire room. Alex had arrived an hour earlier, and we'd spent the time going over his plan. I still wasn't sure about it, but I trusted him to handle the situation. Patricia, Alex said, standing to give her a hug when she walked in. "You look absolutely stunning," my mother practically purred. "Thank you, Alex. You look pretty handsome yourself." We sat in the living room, the three of us forming an awkward triangle on my couch and chairs. My mother kept glancing between Alex and me like she was trying to read the room. So she said finally, "I think we all know why we're here." "We do," Alex agreed. "And I want you to know how much I appreciate your honesty, Patricia. It takes courage to admit your feelings." My mother's face lit up. "I'm so glad you understand. I was worried you'd think I was terrible." "Not at all. In fact, I think this conversation is long overdue." Alex reached over and took my hand, which seemed to surprise my mother. "The thing is," Alex continued, "I need to be honest about my feelings too." "Of course," my mother said, leaning forward expectantly. "Patricia, you're an absolutely incredible woman. Beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated. Any man would be lucky to have your attention." My mother was glowing, but I'm completely, utterly, head over heels in love with Emma. My mother's face fell. "More than that," Alex continued, "I'm gay." The silence in the room was deafening. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I'm sorry, what?" she finally managed. "I'm gay, Patricia. I have been my entire life. I have a boyfriend named Marcus who I've been with for 3 years. Emma and I have been pretending to date because she was tired of you sabotaging her real relationships." My mother looked back and forth between us, her face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and then pure rage. "This is a joke," she said. "It's not a joke," Alex said gently. "Emma asked me to help her because she was losing every good guy she met to your interference. She thought if you were focused on me, you might leave her actual dating life alone. You've been lying to me for 2 months. You've been lying to yourself for years," Alex replied. "Patricia, do you really think it's normal to compete with your own daughter for male attention? Do you really think it's healthy to sabotage her relationships because you can't handle not being the center of attention?" My mother stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this." "No, you don't," Alex agreed. "But maybe you should." She turned to me and I could see genuine hurt in her eyes for the first time in years. "How could you do this to me?" she asked. "How could I do this to you?" I repeated. "Mom, you've chased away every guy I've dated since I was 18. You flirt with them, you text them behind my back, you make them feel guilty for being with me instead of giving you attention. You've sabotaged 6 years of my dating life. I never sabotaged anything. If those boys couldn't handle a little friendly attention from your mother, then they weren't good enough for you anyway." "Friendly attention," Alex laughed. "Patricia, you asked me to meet you for coffee 3 times. You sent me shirtless photos from your yoga class. You told me you thought Emma and I were settling for each other." My mother's face went white. "I never sent you shirtless photos." Alex pulled out his phone and showed her the messages. My mother had indeed sent him several photos from her yoga sessions wearing sports bras and tight leggings with captions about how exercise was keeping her young. "Those weren't shirtless," she protested weakly. "Patricia," Alex said gently, "you're a beautiful woman, but you're also old enough to be my mother. This behavior isn't flattering. It's sad." That's when my mother completely lost it. She started screaming about how we'd humiliated her, how we'd made her look like a fool, how she'd never forgive either of us. She threw the wine bottle against the wall, called me an ungrateful daughter, and told Alex he was a pervert for leading her on. "I'm leaving," she announced dramatically. "And don't expect me to speak to you again anytime soon, Emma. Maybe when you grow up and learn how to treat your mother with respect." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard that my neighbor's dog started barking. Alex and I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. That went better than expected. He said finally, "Better." She threw a bottle at my wall. But she's not going to bother your next boyfriend. Trust me, she's way too embarrassed to pull her usual routine after this. Alex was right, but not in the way either of us expected. For the next 3 weeks, my mother didn't contact me at all. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. It was the longest we'd gone without speaking since I'd moved out of her house. I was starting to think maybe I'd finally gotten through to her, that the shock of being called out so publicly had made her realize how inappropriate her behavior had been. Then I got a call from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. Emma, honey, I need to tell you something about your mother. She said, she's been staying with me since your fight, and she's been telling everyone a very different version of what happened. What do you mean? According to Patricia, you brought home a gay man and pretended he was your boyfriend because you were jealous of the attention he was giving her. She's saying you orchestrated this whole thing to humiliate her because you can't stand that men find her attractive. My blood ran cold. That's not what happened. I know that, honey. But she's been calling everyone in the family, all her friends, even some people at your work. She's painting herself as the victim of some cruel prank you pulled because you're jealous and immature. I felt sick. This was exactly the kind of thing my mother would do when she couldn't control the narrative through manipulation. She'd rewrite history entirely. There's more, Linda continued. She's been posting about it on Facebook. Nothing that names you directly, but anyone who knows your family will be able to figure out what she's talking about. Posts about how hard it is when your own children turn against you, how some daughters can't handle their mothers being attractive. I spent the rest of the day fielding calls and messages from relatives who wanted to know my side of the story. Some of them believed me, but others seemed to think there had to be some truth to my mother's version. The worst part was seeing how she'd twisted everything on social media. She'd posted cryptic messages about family betrayal, shared articles about narcissistic children who abused their parents, and gotten dozens of supportive comments from people who had no idea what had really happened. She's doing exactly what she did to your boyfriends, Alex pointed out when I called him in tears. She's controlling the narrative to make herself look like the victim. I can't fight this, I said. She's too good at this game. Maybe you don't have to fight it. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time to let her win this round. She wants to play the victim. Let her. But that means she also has to live with the consequences of what she's claiming happened. I didn't understand what Alex meant until the next day when I got a call from my cousin Rachel. Emma, I've been thinking about what your mom told everyone she said. And I have to ask you something. If Alex really was just a friend helping you out, why would your mother have been flirting with him in the first place? What do you mean? I mean, according to her story, she was just being friendly to your boyfriend, and you got jealous and decided to humiliate her. But if Alex is gay, and you knew that, why would she have any reason to feel embarrassed about being friendly to him? I could hear the wheels turning in Rachel's head. The only way her story makes sense, Rachel continued, is if she was doing something inappropriate that made the revelation embarrassing. Otherwise, finding out your daughter's boyfriend is gay would just be funny, not humiliating. Other family members started asking the same questions. The more people thought about my mother's version of events, the less sense it made. Why would I go through such an elaborate plan just to embarrass her if she'd done nothing wrong? Why would she be so upset about being tricked if her interactions with Alex had been completely innocent? Why was she staying with Linda instead of just laughing off a harmless prank? Within a week, the family narrative started shifting. People began asking my mother directly what she'd said and done that made Alex's revelation so embarrassing. She couldn't explain it without admitting to inappropriate behavior. Meanwhile, I started dating again. His name was James, and he was a lawyer I'd met through a friend at work. I was completely honest with him about my family situation from the beginning, and to my surprise, he found the whole story more amusing than concerning. So your mother has been sabotaging your relationships, and you got a gay actor to pretend to be your boyfriend. To teach her a lesson, he said, over our third dinner date. That's either the most brilliant thing I've ever heard or the most insane. Probably both. I like it. It shows creativity and problem-solving skills. James was different from the guys I'd dated before. More confident, more established in his life, less likely to be intimidated by family drama. When I finally introduced him to my mother 6 months later, the dynamic was completely different. She tried her usual routine, but James shut it down immediately. Patricia, it's so nice to meet Emma's mother, he said when she gave him one of her lingering hugs. Emma talks about you all the time. But when she started asking personal questions about his job and his family, James redirected every conversation back to me. Emma didn't tell me she was interested in art history. He'd say, "When my mother mentioned my college major, tell me more about what drew you to that field, Emma." When my mother tried to monopolize his attention, James politely but firmly included me in every exchange. That's such an interesting perspective, Patricia. Emma, what do you think about that? By the end of the evening, my mother looked frustrated and confused. Her usual tactics weren't working, and James was making it clear that he was there to see me, not to be charmed by her. After that dinner, she barely tried to interfere in our relationship. She'd still make the occasional comment about how James was fine or how she hoped I wasn't getting too serious too quickly, but the aggressive flirting and inappropriate texting never materialized. James and I got engaged 2 years later. When we announced it to my family, my mother's response was telling. "Well, I suppose he's acceptable," she said, "though I still think you're both very young to be making such a big decision." We were 27 and 31. But here's the thing that still amazes me about this whole situation. My mother never actually acknowledged what she'd been doing to my previous relationships. Even after everything that happened with Alex, even after the family confronted her about her inappropriate behavior, she never admitted that she'd been sabotaging my dating life. In her mind, she'd been the victim of a cruel prank, not the perpetrator of years of emotional manipulation. And in a weird way, that was actually the perfect outcome, because my mother's inability to see herself clearly was also what made Alex's plan so effective. She was so focused on maintaining her victim narrative that she couldn't risk behaving the same way with James if she started flirting with another one of my boyfriends. It would undermine her story about being the wronged party in the Alex situation. Her own narcissism had trapped her into better behavior. The wedding planning was its own adventure. My mother tried to take over several aspects of the event, suggesting we needed a bigger venue, a more expensive photographer, flowers that would be more photogenic, but James had opinions about everything, and he wasn't shy about expressing them. Patricia: I appreciate your input, but Emma and I have already decided on the menu, he'd say when she suggested changing the catering. Or, "That's an interesting idea, but we're happy with our photographer." She couldn't flirt her way into getting what she wanted, and she couldn't manipulate James the way she'd manipulated my previous boyfriends. For the first time in my adult life, I had a partner who was completely immune to my mother's tactics. The wedding itself was beautiful. My mother behaved appropriately, though she did manage to wear a dress that was arguably too attention-grabbing for a mother of the bride. James's family loved me. My friends were happy to finally meet the guy I'd been raving about, and even my extended family seemed relieved to see me with someone who clearly adored me. During the reception, my mother gave a speech that was actually sweet and appropriate. She talked about how proud she was of me, how happy she was to see me with someone who appreciated me, and how she looked forward to welcoming James into the family. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd finally changed. Then during the bouquet toss, she positioned herself right in the middle of all the single women and caught my flowers. "Looks like I'm next," she announced to the crowd, winking at James's unmarried brother. Some things never change. But here's what I learned from this whole experience. You can't fix a narcissistic parent by confronting them directly. They'll just rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. You can't change them by being a better daughter or by finding the right words to make them understand how their behavior affects you. What you can do is protect yourself by choosing partners who won't fall for their manipulation and by creating boundaries that keep their dysfunction from destroying your happiness. Alex's fake boyfriend plan didn't cure my mother of her narcissism, but it did show her that her usual tactics wouldn't work on everyone, and it forced her to modify her behavior just enough for me to have a normal relationship. That's probably the best outcome I could have hoped for. James and I have been married for 3 years now. We have a 1-year-old daughter named Sophie, and my mother is absolutely obsessed with being a grandmother. She babysits twice a week, buys Sophie more clothes than any baby could possibly need, and posts constant photos of them together on social media. Sometimes I catch her looking at James like she's still calculating whether she could steal his attention if she really tried. But then Sophie will do something cute, and my mother will be completely distracted by the opportunity to be the center of a baby's world. I think grandchildren might be the perfect solution for narcissistic mothers. They get unconditional adoration from someone who's too young to see through their manipulation, and they get to feel important and needed without having to compete with their adult children. As for Alex, he and Marcus got married last year. I was a bridesmaid in their wedding, and my mother was invited as my guest. She spent the entire reception trying to set up Alex's single friends with women she knew, apparently having completely forgotten that the reason we'd met was because he was gay. "Emma, you should introduce that nice tall one to your cousin Jennifer," she whispered during the cocktail hour. "He seems like he'd be perfect for her." "Mom, they're all gay. It's a gay wedding. Well, you never know." Sometimes people experiment. I just laughed. After everything we'd been through, my mother was still my mother. Still beautiful, still charming, still completely unable to see the world from anyone's perspective but her own. But she was also no longer able to destroy my relationships. And that was enough. The most important thing I learned from this whole experience is that you don't have to fix your family to be happy. You just have to figure out how to protect yourself from their worst impulses while still maintaining whatever relationship is possible. My mother will probably always be a narcissist. She'll probably always need to be the center of attention, always struggle with the idea that other people have needs and feelings that matter as much as hers do. But she'll also probably always be my mother. And despite everything, I do love her. I just love myself enough now to not let her destroy my happiness in the process. And sometimes that's the most you can ask for from a complicated family relationship. The fake boyfriend plan worked not because it changed my mother, but because it changed me. It taught me that I could take control of situations that felt hopeless, that I could protect myself without completely cutting ties, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim. My mother still doesn't think she did anything wrong with my previous boyfriends. She still believes her version of the Alex story, where she was the innocent victim of a cruel daughter's jealousy. But she also knows that her usual tactics don't work on James, and she's seen what happens when she pushes too far. That's probably as close to a happy ending as our relationship is ever going to get, and honestly, I'm okay with that. A psychopath saved a life and no one believed it. Jake, the kid everyone whispered about in hallways, his guidance counselor had just slapped him with the unofficial concerning student label after some psychological evaluation went sideways. So, he decides to celebrate by wandering through the old cemetery because nothing says normal like hanging out with dead people, right? He spots a little girl sitting perfectly still by a grave, not crying, not playing, just sitting there like a tiny statue. Most people would think visiting grandma, but Jake's brain goes straight to something's very wrong here. He walks over, asks if she's okay. She looks up with glassy eyes and whispers, "I can't remember how to get home." She's been sitting there since morning and it's almost dark now. Jake realizes she's showing signs of severe dehydration. He calls 911, stays with her, shares his water bottle. Paramedics arrive and confirm she's in serious medical trouble. She'd wandered away from her babysitter hours earlier and was slowly shutting down in the heat. Everyone else had walked past assuming she was fine, but the part that still guts me. The same week, Jake gets labeled as lacking empathy. He's the only person who stopped to help a dying child. The girl's parents tried to thank him, but Jake had already disappeared back into the cemetery. The paramedic later said it was like Jake could see things others couldn't. A random kid started calling me mom and I couldn't stop crying. I had taken my kids to the local library's weekend play hour. They were setting up a puppet show in the children's area, and I thought it would be a nice break for all of us. My 3 little ones settled in quickly, sitting on the carpet near a few other kids, whispering and giggling as the show began. I sat on the edge just watching, relieved for a quiet moment. A few minutes in, my kids kept turning to wave and whisper, "Hi, Mom," whenever they spotted me watching, and I'd smile, sometimes wiggle my fingers back. I noticed a boy I didn't recognize sitting nearby, tiny, maybe 3 or 4 years old. After a few waves from my kids, he started doing the same, waving shyly at me and softly calling out, "Mom." At first, I thought he was mistaking me for someone else, but when I smiled at him, he lit up like I just handed him the moon. He kept doing it every few minutes, looking for my reaction, and I kept smiling back. I didn't want to upset anyone, so I looked around for who he might be with, but no one stepped forward. When the show ended and I started gathering our jackets, a woman came over and introduced herself as one of the coordinators. She told me the little boy was staying with the temporary foster family and had come with a volunteer. Then she quietly said, "He's had a hard few weeks." I think that moment meant more than you know. I hugged my kids a little tighter as we left, blinking away tears I didn't want to explain. Am I the jerk for not inviting my mom to my wedding, but inviting my stepmom? My biological mom walked out when I was 8 to find herself in California with some guy named Chad who sold essential oils at farmers markets. Meanwhile, my stepmom, Lisa, showed up 2 years later and literally taught me how to tie my shoes, helped with homework, came to every soccer game, and held my hair back during my first hangover in high school. But apparently, according to half my family, DNA trumps actually showing up for someone's life. My mom resurfaces after 15 years of radio silence wanting to play mother of the bride because, and I quote, "It's my right as your real mother." While completely ignoring the fact that she missed every birthday, graduation, and heartbreak in between, Lisa never once claimed to be replacing anyone. She just quietly became the person who was there when I needed someone most. But here's where everyone's calling me the "I sent Lisa the invitation" with mother of the bride written on it. And my bio mom got a generic +1 to the reception only. Cue the family drama and guilt trips about blood being thicker than water. But you know what the full quote is? "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb," which means the family you choose is stronger than the family. You're born into Lisa earned her seat in the front row by showing up for 18 years, not by sharing my DNA for 9 months. Sometimes being the jerk means honoring the people who actually loved you instead of the ones who just happened to give birth to you. Anesthesiologists. What was something you won't forget? Hearing from someone under. I'm a nurse anesthetist. Last Tuesday, right before going under for gallbladder surgery, Mrs. Henderson suddenly grabbed my wrist and whispered, "The pineapple magnet knows where we buried the time capsule with Jake's letters," then mumbled something that sounded like coordinates before going out cold. I thought about it all day. That night, I drove by her house. Sure enough, there was a pineapple magnet on the mailbox. I followed the coordinates into her backyard, dug where an old sundial used to be, and found a rusted metal box. Inside were over 100 letters between her and someone named Jake, written over 15 years under names like Admiral Stargazer and Captain Nebula. Each one ended with, "Someday I'll tell you the truth." The next morning, I called her to check on her recovery and casually mentioned telescopes. She laughed quietly and said, "I hope he still remembers." He stopped writing after his dad told him I wasn't really his grandmother. Then she paused. I was just the neighbor, but I loved him like he was mine. Still do. She asked me not to tell him if he ever came looking. Let him believe it was all real. She said it was real to me. I told her maybe she should check her garden soon. She went quiet. Then she whispered, "So he really kept them." I said, "You both did. Best friends who swore you'd never drift apart." What happened, Rosie and I had this wonderfully elaborate tradition where we'd crash wedding receptions together. Not for the free food, but the salmon was usually decent. But because we'd invented this game called Guess the Divorce Timeline, where we'd analyze the guest's body language and predict which couples wouldn't make it past their second anniversary. And guess what? We were disturbingly accurate. Anyway, last month, I get this gorgeous wedding invitation in the mail. Thick cardstock, fancy calligraphy, the works. Rosie Elizabeth Morrison cordially invites me to witness her union with some guy named David at the country club we'd always mocked for its aggressively beige interior. But the part that still guts me, Rosie never mentioned anyone named David. And we talked constantly about everything, including her ongoing feud with the grocery store guy, who commented on her frozen pizza choices. So I call her expecting some explanation about mysterious David, and she goes completely silent. Then she says, "Oh, you got the invitation." Little did I know Rosie had been engaged for 8 months to a guy she met at one of our wedding crashes. And she'd been too embarrassed to tell me because David was exactly the type we'd spent years making fun of. Khaki pants, investment portfolio discussions, the whole package. I showed up anyway, found Rosie in her white dress and whispered, "So how long do you think this one will last?" She started laughing and said, "Honestly, I've been wondering the same thing for months. Caught my husband on a dating app. He says he was just curious. So there I was doing the most American thing possible, ordering DoorDash at 10 p.m. because I'm too lazy to cook. Scrolling through my phone trying to decide between Thai food or pizza for the third time this week when I see my husband's phone light up with a notification on the coffee table. Now I'm not usually the snoopy type. I respect privacy and all that mature married couple stuff, but the preview showed some girl named Madison with way too many heart emojis and a message that started with, 'Hey, handsome.' So obviously, I had to investigate because what the actual hell? I grab his phone while he's in the bathroom doing God knows what for 20 minutes and bam, there's a whole dating profile with pictures I've never seen before. We're talking professional level photos, including one where he's flexing at some fancy gym that we definitely don't have a membership to because we can barely afford our Planet Fitness Black Card. His bio literally says, "Recently single and ready to mingle. Looking for someone who appreciates craft beer and weekend adventures. Recently single. I've been married to this man for 6 years and suddenly he's some adventurous craft beer. Connoisseur. The guy drinks Bud Light and considers going to Target an adventure. I'm scrolling through his matches, and there's like 50 women he's been chatting with. 50. There's Ashley, the yoga instructor, Brittany, the real estate agent, and don't even get me started on Skylar, who apparently sent him photos I definitely don't want to see. My hands are literally shaking as I'm reading these conversations where he's telling these women he's newly divorced and ready to explore. And I'm like, news to me, buddy. When he finally comes out of the bathroom, I'm standing there in the living room holding his phone like I'm about to launch it through our 65-inch TV that we're still paying off. "Babe, I can explain." He starts and I'm like, "Oh, this should be good because I'm dying to hear how you explain being on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge simultaneously while married to me." He gets this deer in headlights look and goes, "It's not what it looks like." Okay, I was just curious about what's out there. You know, like window shopping, but for people. I wasn't actually going to meet anyone. I swear, window shopping for people. I told him, "Well, congratulations, honey, because now you can stop window shopping and actually go test drive some of these models from your new apartment." The audacity of this man. He starts backtracking, saying he loves me, and it was just a stupid mistake. But I'm already pulling out my phone to screenshot all his conversations because my divorce attorney is going to have a field day with this evidence. You want to know what's really messed up? I tell him while I'm screenshotting his chat with some 23-year-old named Chloe. You told Madison here that you're looking for someone who appreciates home-cooked meals, but you haven't eaten anything. I've made in 3 months without complaining. He's trying to grab his phone back, but I'm already sending everything to my email because I'm not stupid. The look on his face when I started dragging his Xbox toward the front door was absolutely priceless, like I just told him Santa wasn't real. You can't take my Xbox. He whines, and I'm like, watch me, window shopper. I packed up his gaming, set up his stupid craft beer collection that he never drinks, and threw in his lucky fishing hat that makes him look like a discount version of a Bass Pro Shop model. Turns out curiosity didn't just kill the cat. It killed his marriage, his Xbox privileges, and his chances of keeping the house with the good Wi-Fi. And yes, I kept the house, the dog, and I'm keeping his Netflix password because apparently I'm petty like that. But honestly, he deserves it. Madison and the other 49 women can have him, but they're getting damaged goods now. And good luck dealing with his habit of leaving dirty dishes in the sink and his obsession with watching the same 3 Marvel movies on repeat. Oh, and ladies, if you're out there swiping and see a guy named Brad who claims he's recently divorced and loves adventure, just know he considers going to Costco on a Saturday. His idea of living dangerously. Ever get a birthday wish from Domino's but not your bestie? It was my 26th birthday, and I'm sitting alone in my studio apartment eating leftover pizza when my phone buzzes with a text from Domino's saying, "Happy birthday, enjoy 20% off your next order." And I actually smiled for the first time all day because at least someone remembered. My best friend since middle school, the one who used to sleep over every weekend and knew I was terrified of the dark. The one who held my hair back at homecoming when I puked up too much smearing off ice behind the Dairy Queen. She hadn't said a word, even though Facebook literally sends you notifications, and we'd been texting about random TikToks just 2 days before. I kept making excuses for her, thinking maybe she was busy with her new job in Denver or planning some surprise. But then I saw her Instagram story that night, and she was at Topgolf with people I'd never seen before, laughing and posting about her amazing new squad with heart emojis everywhere. That's when it hit me like a freight train. Somewhere between high school graduation and now, I'd become the friend she kept around out of habit, not love. The safety net she'd text when her shiny new friends weren't available. The pizza company that just wanted my money cared more about my existence than the person who used to promise we'd be sisters forever. And honestly, that automated text message felt more genuine than our last 10 conversations combined. Ever hid your emotions because men don't cry was drilled into your childhood. So there I am, 32 years old, sitting in my car outside the movie theater after watching Inside Out 2 with my girlfriend, and I'm literally holding back tears because apparently animated movies about feelings hit different when you've spent 3 decades bottling everything up. My dad's voice is still playing on repeat in my head. Real men don't cry, son. Toughen up. What are you girl classic 90s parenting right there, folks? Meanwhile, Sarah's looking at me like, dude, it's okay to have emotions about a Pixar movie, but I'm over here doing mental math trying to figure out if getting misty-eyed over cartoon characters makes me less of a man according to the toxic masculinity handbook I never asked for. Then my phone buzzes. It's a text from my little nephew. Uncle Mike, I cried during the movie too. My friend said, boys don't cry, but you always tell me it's okay to feel things. Are you proud of me? And boom, it hits me like a freight train made of irony and childhood trauma. Here's this 8-year-old kid being braver than I've ever been. And I realize I've been so busy protecting myself from my dad's outdated rulebook that I almost forgot the most important lesson. The strongest thing you can teach the next generation isn't how to hide their pain. It's how to feel it, own it, and still show up as the man they want to be. So I texted him back, prouder than you'll ever know, buddy. Real men cry when something matters to them. Ever watched everyone celebrate someone else's birthday while yours went completely unnoticed? So there I was, sitting in the break room, watching my coworkers sing happy birthday to Jessica from accounting. You know, the one who pronounces Target like Targe and thinks putting avocado on everything makes her a wellness influencer. Meanwhile, I'm literally wearing a birthday badge my mom bought me on Amazon. Because let's be real, I'm 28 and still hoping someone will notice it's my special day too. The cake came out, the Instagram story started flying, and I'm just sitting there like a human participation trophy, pretending to be thrilled about Jessica's surprise party that she definitely planned herself. But here's the kicker. As I'm scrolling through my phone, feeling sorry for myself, I see a text from my little sister. Happy birthday, loser. Mom made your favorite cake, and we're all waiting for you to come home. Some of us actually matter, you know? Turns out, while I was busy expecting strangers to make my day special, my family had been blowing up my phone all morning with birthday wishes I was too busy feeling invisible to notice. Sometimes the people who really see you aren't the ones you're desperately trying to impress. They're the ones who've been celebrating you all along, even when you're too caught up in your own pity party to see it. When did you realize you were not the favorite child? At 13, sitting in the bleachers at my brother's Little League championship game, watching my parents lose their absolute minds cheering for him while I sat there in my math competition. Medal that I'd won 3 hours earlier, the one nobody had even asked to see. I kept waiting for them to look over to give me that same proud smile, but their eyes never left the field. And when Jake struck out in the 7th inning, my mom actually started crying like he just lost a full ride to college instead of a suburban Illinois rec league trophy. That's when it hit me. I could cure cancer, and they'd probably ask if I remembered to Jake's JV basketball game. But here's the thing that really guts me. I found out years later, going through old photo albums after Dad's funeral, that they had taken pictures of me at that math competition, dozens of them. And my mom had even made copies to send to my grandparents with a note that said, "Our little genius makes us so proud, they just never knew how to show it the way they did with Jake's sports. Never knew that I needed to see that same wild joy in their eyes when I won with my brain instead of a bat." I spent 15 years thinking I was invisible, when really I was just loved in a language I didn't understand. For people who've moved to a new country, what was the biggest challenge? I found out I was pregnant the same day my work visa got approved for Canada. I'm sitting in that doctor's office staring at 2 pink lines while my Toronto job offer crinkles in my sweaty palm. My boyfriend Alex doesn't know about either thing yet. I walked straight out and got my passport stamped because somehow that felt easier than making a phone call. 3 weeks later, I'm in Toronto eating pho above a Vietnamese restaurant, Googling Canadian healthcare while texting Alex back home. He texted asking why I quit my job. I replied that I was in Canada now. He texted back asking if I was insane. 6 months later, he shows up at my door. Turns out he'd been planning to propose the day I vanished, kept the ring in his pocket for half a year, and flew across an ocean to ask me a question. We're eating soup when he notices I'm not touching the beer he brought. His face goes white. How far along 7 months, I tell him. He puts this tiny velvet box next to the sriracha bottle. "I came to ask you to marry me, but now I think I should ask if you want me to stay." I looked at that ring, and at him, then at my belly. "I don't know, but do you want to find out together?" He moved here 2 months before our daughter was born. We never married, but kept that ring on our kitchen table for years next to the salt and pepper. Has another parent ever gotten mad at you for saying no to child? Yeah. Well, what she didn't know was that the toy she wanted me to hand over was the last thing my son would ever touch. We were at Target in the toy aisle, and this woman's daughter kept reaching for the Batman action figure in my cart. And when I gently moved it away, the mom marched over demanding I give it to her kid because she saw it first and you're teaching children to be greedy. I tried explaining it was a gift, but she got louder and more aggressive, calling me selfish in front of other shoppers. And I just stood there taking it because I couldn't tell her that 6 months ago my 8-year-old son Marcus had begged me for that exact Batman figure before his leukemia got worse. The morning he died, he kept that Batman on his nightstand, whispering about adventures they'd have when he got better. And I promised him I'd buy another one to remember him by. But here's what broke me. When she finally snatched it from my hands and gave it to her daughter, saying there, "That wasn't so hard." I didn't fight back because watching that little girl's face light up reminded me so much of Marcus that I couldn't take that happiness away. I walked out of Target empty-handed and sobbing, realizing that sometimes saying no isn't about being selfish. It's about protecting the pieces of your heart that are too fragile to share with strangers who will never understand what they're asking you to give up. Has your family ever bothered you over baby names? My entire extended family held an intervention because I wanted to name my son River, not because it's weird because it was my dead brother's name. You can't name a baby after someone who committed suicide Thanksgiving dinner like she was delivering breaking news. It's bad luck. My mom suggested Ryan instead, as if switching 2 letters would somehow fool the universe. River was troubled, my dad added. You don't want that energy around a newborn. Energy like mental illness is contagious through baby names. Here's what nobody wanted to talk about. River wasn't just my brother, he was my twin. We shared everything for 24 years until depression took him and left me here, planning a nursery that feels like building a shrine. They spent 3 months bombarding me with safer suggestions, traditional names that wouldn't make people uncomfortable at PDA meetings. When my son was born last Tuesday, the nurse asked what name to put on the bracelet. I looked at my husband, who'd stayed silent through months of family pressure, and whispered, "River James, because sometimes you honor the dead by refusing to let the living erase them." Have you ever been banned from a drive-thru for being too polite? Yeah, McDonald's on 5th Street, and honestly, they had it coming. When I was 17 and mom was dying of cancer, I started going there daily, spending 20 minutes at the window asking about Jessica's kids, Marcus's weekend plans, Sarah's cold. I memorized their schedules, their stories, their lives. The manager thought I was casing the joint. Truth is, those drive-through workers were the only people who didn't look at me with pity. They didn't know about the chemo appointments or how I'd sit in that parking lot for hours because going home meant watching mom fade away. For 6 months, I treated that drive-through like therapy and those minimum wage workers like family. Then mom died on a Tuesday in November. I showed up the next day, same time, same order. But when Jessica asked how I was doing, I broke down completely sobbing, ugly crying right there while cars honked behind me. The manager came out and said, "Kid, you seem like you're going through something, but you can't keep holding up the line like this. Find a different place to process your feelings." I never went back. 20 years later, I still drive past that McDonald's and wonder if Jessica or Marcus ever think about the weird kid who cared too much about their lives because he was too afraid to deal with his own. Have you ever met a celebrity but acted like you didn't know them? I'm working at this tiny bookstore in Seattle when Ryan Gosling walks in, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Baseball cap, pulled down sunglasses indoors, that whole "please don't perceive me" energy. I'm 19 and completely broke because my dad had just been diagnosed with cancer, and I've been sending every paycheck home to help with medical bills. This was right after The Notebook, so my brain is screaming internally, but I just act normal and ask if he needs help finding anything. He's super polite, buys this random poetry book, and I ring him up without making a big deal about it. As he's leaving, he pauses and says, "Thanks for being cool about this." And I just shrug like I have no idea what he means. Later, I'm closing up and find this envelope he must have left behind with my name on it. Inside is a note that says, "Your discretion means more than you know," and a check for $2,000. I stared at that check for like 10 minutes, thinking it was fake or a mistake, but it was real. I called my dad crying and told him I could finally afford to come home for his surgery. Dad asks how I got the money, and I just say I picked up extra shifts. I never told him about Ryan Gosling because honestly, who would believe that story? Dad's surgery went perfectly, and he's been cancer-free for 15 years now, and I still have that poetry book Ryan bought sitting on my shelf. Have you ever met a celebrity but acted like you don't know them? Well, I saw my father at a Cost of Coffee in Manchester last Tuesday. He was working behind the counter. Yeah, the man who walked out 17 years ago to find himself is now asking if I want extra foam. I ordered my usual flat white stone-faced, watching him fumble with the machine he clearly just learned to use. His wedding ring caught the light. Different wife, obviously, and I almost asked if she knows about his previous family or if we're just his embarrassing pilot episode that got canceled. He genuinely didn't recognize me until I said, "Thanks, David," instead of "Dad," and his face went white like he'd seen a ghost, which technically he had. His little daughter was coloring at a corner table, maybe 6 years old, getting the childhood I never finished. When he whispered, "Christ, is that really you?" I just smiled and said, "Wrong person, mate," then walked out with his perfect coffee made by his shaking hands. So your revenge does taste like overpriced lattes. And watching your replacement father realize his past just ordered a drink from his future. And honestly, I've never tipped better in my life. Have you ever quit something everyone told you not to? When I was 13, my parents enrolled me in violin lessons because of my musical prodigy hands. My teacher, Miss Abernathy, wore scarves with their own gravitational pull and spoke exclusively in dramatic metaphors. For 5 years, I practiced scales, while my friends did normal teenager things. I advanced to our city's youth orchestra, which sounds impressive until you realize I was counting measures and praying I wouldn't destroy Mozart's legacy. My entire family had built their dreams around my musical future. My parents invested thousands. Grandparents drove hours for recital. My sister took up flute so we could duet our way through life. So when I announced at Sunday dinner that I was quitting violin, you'd think I'd suggested selling our house to join a circus. "But you're so talented," said my mom. "Think of all the time invested. What about Juilliard?" The family intervention lasted weeks. My violin teacher showed up unannounced, clutching sheet music like sacred texts, her scarf dramatically billowing despite the lack of wind. But here's what nobody understood. I discovered writing. Late at night, after half-hearted practice, I filled notebooks with stories. While everyone heard screeching when I played violin, I heard silence. The silence of doing something that wasn't really me. 5 years later, at my first book signing, Dad leaned over and whispered, "Thank God you quit that violin. You were really terrible." Sometimes the bravest thing is putting down the instrument everyone expected you to master and picking up the one that's been waiting for your